Straight ahead, hour two of this special edition of Newsmax Prime. Ted Cruz offers two different assessments of his campaign in one day, while Marco Rubio says he won't be Trump's number two. Then Facebook treating conservative stories and websites as if they're number two or worse. Plus, the worsening conditions on our southern border. Will they improve the chances for Donald Trump this November? Hour two of Newsmax Prime starts right now. Good evening and welcome to Hour 2 of Newsmax Prime on this Tuesday evening. I'm J.D. Hayworth. Of prime interest this hour, 2 in 1 from Texas. Senator Ted Cruz seemed to reconsider the suspension of his campaign this morning, but then reconsidered that reconsideration late this afternoon, all against the backdrop of voters in two states, West Virginia and Nebraska, taking part in their respective primaries.
Well, I am not holding my breath. My assumption is that will not happen. But listen, let's be very clear. If there is a path to victory, we launched this campaign intending to win. The reason we suspended the race last week is with Indiana's loss, I didn't see a viable path to victory. If that changes, we will certainly respond accordingly.
Listen, we have suspended the campaign. We've suspended the campaign because I can see no viable path to victory. Of course, if that changed, we would reconsider things. But let's be clear, we're not going to win Nebraska today. There should be no mystery, no excitement in that. We've withdrawn from the campaign, and it's in the hands of the voters.
It is in the hands of the voters, and I am on your screen again for this expanded edition because Dennis Michael Lynch has the night off. Just wanted to get that straight. DML will be back pretty soon. And we want you to know that we are going to be taking your calls for the next hour at 1-877-NEWSMAX, 1-877-639-7629. All the campaign goings on and the fits and starts. And of course, tonight in West Virginia, as we mentioned earlier, Donald Trump projected the Republican victor there, and we showed you numbers just before the break at the top of the hour. Bernie Sanders winning the Nebraska caucus on the Democratic side and leading right now in West Virginia. You see the numbers there from Nebraska. 99% of the caucus goers reporting in Bernie's big win there, and he had a lead of 7 points, with now 13% of the precincts reporting in West Virginia. But of course, for most of us of a conservative bent, the Republican race, such as it is, actually attracts more of our interest. And to talk more about what's going on, we're pleased to be joined by the former Lieutenant Governor of New York, Betsy McCaughey. Betsy Skyping in tonight from Connecticut. And from Newsmax, New York, attorney and political operative Sam Nunberg. You know, it's been interesting. What a trip it's been for Sam. We first got together when he was working for Trump, and I did that big interview with the Donald last summer. Right. Then he was over with Cruz, and lately he's been talking about getting back on the Trump train. I got to ask you, Sam, when you heard about Ted Cruz earlier today, what was your reaction?
Well, he was giving an answer to Glenn Beck about if he would win Nebraska, whether or not he'd re-enter the race. And it was a hypothetical. I don't think they expect to win Nebraska. But the interesting thing is, you have to remember, JD, he has the third most amount of votes ever in a Republican primary. He has the most amount of votes, delegates ever, finishing second. And he has 1.5 million donors. And Jeff Rowe and the campaign structure there are going to control the delegates. And they said that they want their delegates to be at the convention in order to work on the platform. So he has a message, and like I said to you last week, he is certainly the most important supporter right now for Donald Trump. And if we need unity in the party, and I do think eventually they'll end up coming together, but it's just going to be a process, and we're going to have to wait and see.
Well, let me turn to Betsy McCaughey. You know, Betsy, whether it was hypothetical or not, this soundbite from Glenn Beck's radio show took off to the point where we saw Ted Cruz come out this afternoon, the gaggle of the press around him as he had returned to the Senate, and he used another word, and since you're both attorneys, you can probably tell the difference. He used the word withdraw instead of suspend with the reporters tonight. Should he have done that earlier in this situation to clear up any confusion, or your take now on Ted Cruz?
Well, generally candidates suspend rather than withdraw so that they can control their delegates. at the convention. Sometimes it's an opportunity to be a kingmaker or to have a big impact on the platform. And that's probably why he didn't do it before. But I think it's mostly a question of wishful thinking. And of course, everybody just was immediately attracted to that comment because it's a moment of human drama. Someone who aspired to do something and would still love to do it, but his time is gone.
And he is not back in the race, but we are going back to our telephones tonight in hour number 2. And let's welcome from Hampton, Ohio, Stephen to Newsmax Prime. Stephen, it's good to have you. Your assessment of all the goings on today and in the campaign in general.
Thank you, JD, for having me on.
You bet.
I believe that Michael Reagan said something earlier that kind of disturbed me, and on your last segment. And I believe that if you stay home and you don't vote for Trump or you don't vote for Hillary, that's the lesser of the two evils. So that means Hillary Trump will probably be president.
You mean Hillary Clinton? Well, this is the point, Stephen, that Newt Gingrich.
Clinton, yeah.
Newt Gingrich said, "Look, if you're opposed to Trump, you're de facto for Hillary," and you strongly believe that to be the case, right, Stephen?
I believe that 100%, and I believe that if people don't get out and vote, now I believe Trump is a loudmouth. I believe that he says things off the top of his head before he thinks. But I think his heart is genuinely in the right direction.
All right. Stephen, we appreciate your assessment. Let's go to our panel now. And we touched on this with Michael Reagan before the break, Betsy, and he was a bit dubious. But in this politically correct age, the fact that Trump gets up and at times says things that some may consider over the top seems to be one of the major sources of his appeal.
Absolutely. Americans are tired of these over-rehearsed politicians who are so guarded, so out for themselves, that they don't talk frankly to the American people. That's one of Trump's big appeals. Of course, his major appeal is that he's going to bring jobs back to this country and reignite an economy that has so stumbled, so stalled, that millions of Americans are really suffering. Trump will turn that around.
Let me go to our good friend Sam here on this whole question. Do you accept what Stephen was saying and what Newt said earlier? If you stay home, that's a vote for Hillary?
Oh, 100%. I mean, look, we're still in the middle of this process, and I assume after the convention we're going to be a united party. And trust me, when Donald turns some of that attention over to Hillary, he'll gain a lot of these supporters that right now don't want to vote for him. You know, it was a very contentious primary, and Donald is plays to win, and maybe he played a little too hard against his fellow Republicans, but there's no better person to unite the party than Hillary Clinton, and also the fact that we can end Barack Obama's legacy. Look, I've had my problems with Donald, and I've had philosophical problems with Donald, but one thing I can tell you is that he's a true patriot. He means what he says, and just as Betsy said, he is going to bring jobs back. He is going to strengthen the military. He's going to take care of our veterans, and of course, he's going to build that wall. And at that point, I think that we're going to see a united party, and we're also going to see a lot of people come into the party. But, you know, the onus is on Donald right now to unite the Republican Party. I think Thursday should go well, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, that meeting with Paul Ryan and others, who knows, maybe Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio will show up. We've got more on Marco and his situation, but we're going to go back to the phones. The Keystone State of Pennsylvania. Suzanne is on the line. And Suzanne, I don't want to mess up the name of your hometown. Where are you calling us from tonight?
I'm calling you from Chickasha, Pennsylvania.
Chickasha, Pennsylvania. Okay, Suzanne, what's on your mind?
Well, I am amazed that the American people can't open their eyes and see how they're being fleeced by the Clinton Corporation, and why are they picking on Donald Trump? I mean, the thing is, he's trying to make our country great again. And the thing is, you know, he's an executive. And the thing is, he knows how to talk to people. to get their attention.
Let me ask you this,
And
Suzanne.
I'm all for Trump.
Let me just ask you, is it basically you believe he is going to get things done? It's a
Yes,
can-do.
he will.
Okay. All right. Good deal. Suzanne, we appreciate it. Let's let Betsy weigh in on this.
I'm glad Suzanne is calling from Pennsylvania. I was born in Pennsylvania, so I feel a little kinship with you, Suzanne. I was born in Pittsburgh. But also, it's very important to look at Pennsylvania tonight because the latest poll coming out shows Trump ahead of Clinton in Pennsylvania with a powerful support from white males particularly. But this is the first time we've seen Trump really pulling ahead of Hillary in one of these Rust Belt states that Republicans need to win to capture the White House. So I'm glad Suzanne called in tonight to raise that issue.
Yep, and it looks like Pennsylvania could end up in the Republican column. Some more Republican news before we go to the break. Marco Rubio shows up on CNN this afternoon confirming what our own John Gizzi reported last week, that he's not going to be Donald Trump's number 2. Let's watch and listen. Well, maybe
he'd be best served by having someone, not just by the way a vice presidential nominee, but active surrogates who agree with him.
Well, you heard him right there. You didn't see him. So Rubio says, no, he doesn't want to be vice president. Is it something where it was a conviction, Sam, or the realization that Trump wasn't going to pick him?
Well, I know for a fact that the Rubio people did reach out to the Trump campaign, and they made some overtures of saying initially that Marco would be interested in being VP. But then I think Marco's big donors, whether it was Paul Singer or others, spoke to Marco, and they basically said, look, if you want to have a political future, you better hope that if Donald selects you as VP, he's basically elected Caesar. I mean, Marco should either decide that he's going to help Donald, or he should say, look, I don't support Donald. He's not the kind of Republican I want as president. But he's playing this both ways. And I think the best thing for Marco to basically do now is to basically, just go away and, see how it plays out. And if he decides at the end he wants to help Donald win Florida, that would be great. But to give this mishmash where we don't really understand where his supporters should go is really, it's not productive.
You know what, Sam? It sounds like you are getting back in the Trump category. Would you tell Senator Rubio to, quote, go away? Listen,
Welcome, Sam.
Yeah. So listen, Betsy and Sam.
I always said I would vote for Donald if he was the nominee.
All right.
I thought that Senator Cruz.
Well, I'm sure that a lot of people are just really pleased with your conduct based on the phone calls we're getting here. Betsy and Sam, stay right there. When we come back, something very curious in terms of social media. Facebook turning its back on conservatives. That and more after this. Newsmax Prime wants your voice to be heard. Now we're offering you the chance to send in a video to sound off. Simply go to newsmaxusa.com and follow the on-screen instructions from your computer or mobile device. Sound off with Newsmax Prime. And, of course, you can also call us here during the course of this program tonight. The number to call, 1-877-NEWSMAX, 1-877-639-7629. Of course, in addition to videos and phone calls, the internet offers another form of interaction, all those social media sites. But Miranda Khan is here to say that Facebook may face increased scrutiny after reports that Facebook was censoring conservatives.
Yeah, JD, here's a story you may not see trending tonight on Facebook. A U.S. Senate committee is launching an inquiry after a report surfaced accusing the social media site of filtering its trending news to exclude conservative sources like Newsmax.
For the most part, we all try to get along.
The 2016 presidential election was a top trending story on Facebook last year. And with Pew Research reporting that 63% of Facebook users already consider the social media site a news source, Facebook is doing its part to make sure that trend continues.
To find the other side of the story, or realize there's actually 17 sides to the story.
But if that side of the story leans right, some former Facebook employees known as news curators say you may not hear about it. The so-called whistleblowers sounded the alarm to Gizmodo, accusing the social media site of suppressing conservative news. It was absolutely biased. It just depends on who the curator is and what time of day it is. In other words, instead of this,
Find out what everyone's saying and sharing and liking.
What has happened to our
and
party?
not liking.
the unidentified curator says stories covered by conservative outlets like Newsmax that were trending enough to be picked up by Facebook's algorithm were excluded unless mainstream sites like the New York Times covered the same stories. In the words of the former curator, it wasn't trending news at all, it was an opinion.
If that turns out to be true, it's very disappointing, and I think it undermines the credibility of Facebook.
One group especially not liking the idea of conservative censorship is the GOP, posting this statement on its site. With 167 million U.S. Facebook users reading stories highlighted in the trending section, Facebook has the power to greatly influence the presidential election. It is beyond disturbing to learn that this power is being used to silence viewpoints and stories that don't fit someone else's agenda. Censorship in any form should give Americans who value their fundamental freedoms great pause. And pause Facebook did, offering this statement in response to those allegations. We found no evidence that the anonymous allegations are true. Facebook does not allow or advise our reviewers to systematically discriminate against sources of any ideological origin, and we've designed our tools to make that technically not feasible. Violating our guidelines is a fireable offense.
We want America to be great.
And Newsmax CEO Chris Ruddy is also weighing in on the Facebook possibly targeting Newsmax and other conservative outlets. You can read his thoughts by visiting our website, newsmax.com. JD, back to you.
Miranda, we will not work to censor your reports in any way, shape, fashion, or form.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And we've got some folks who offer unvarnished advice to us. Our panel, again, checking in via Skype from Connecticut, former New York Lieutenant Governor Betsy McCaughey, and from Newsmax New York, attorney and political operative Sam Nunberg, who's had an interesting journey in this campaign, first with Trump, then with Cruz, now back over on the Trump train. Betsy, let me go to you first in terms of your background as a constitutional lawyer. Miranda referenced a hearing tomorrow in the U.S. Senate. I imagine about the highways and byways of the internet, but can that square with First Amendment rights? Can Facebook say, hey, look, we got the right to do what we want to in terms of trafficking and using our algorithms to put leftist causes in greater favor?
Well, it's not clear that Facebook is going to be required to provide balanced content, because the fact is that none of the news outlets are actually required to provide balanced content, except to the extent that they air interviews of one candidate, then they must offer the opposing candidate equal time. But we all know that media outlets have various points of view, and I don't think that Congress is going to get very far with Facebook. But the American people, on the other hand, I just can't imagine anybody using Facebook if it means that they're not going to get the Newsmax point of view. Can you imagine living without our point of view?
Well, and that's why we want everybody here. And as I understand it, calling in from Santa Fe, New Mexico with her point of view, we've got Sky on the line. Sky, are you a Facebook user?
Yes, I am, and I'm glad you're doing the coverage on this.
What's your reaction to the notion of Facebook censoring conservative sites via algorithms?
Well, I don't think it's a good idea. And just to also let you know, I watch Newsmax religiously, and I also changed my party from Democrat to Republican, and I'm all for Trump winning the election. I hope he's going to have Arnold Schwarzenegger as his VP. What do you think of that?
Well, Arnold certainly has celebrity status, but I think there may be a constitutional question, Sam. The native-born citizen, natural-born citizen, since Arnold is an immigrant to this country who is qualified constitutionally to be governor of California, but I believe that stands in the way, does it not?
Well, he may actually have a bigger conflict, JD. He's the host of Apprentice too. He replaced Donald, so I think he's busy, unfortunately.
Yeah, let me ask Sky another question. Sky, we appreciate your admiration of Arnold, but I'm just interested in your party switching. Was it the Trump candidacy, or what got you to switch parties there in Santa Fe?
I really am in favor of Mr. Trump's campaign, and I really like his standing on securing our country.
So it's security.
Security, absolutely,
Right.
and jobs.
And you're from a border state. Did his comments on illegal immigration influence you at the outset as well?
Yes.
All right, let's turn to Betsy McCaughey. You know, Betsy, we've talked about this before, but when Donald Trump, being really the only noteworthy exception to all the Washington crowd on the border, that really defined Donald Trump and really helped him catch fire.
It did.
Yes, it did. And also, from the beginning, he was the first one to stress the desperate situation of Americans all over the country who need employment. He focused on that far more than any of the other 17 candidates on the stage from the beginning, the loss of employment in this country.
Yeah, I mean, he really set the stage for a number of issues that people were talking about, but it certainly wasn't coming to the forefront, as JD mentioned, security being one of them and immigration as well.
Well, let's get back to the phones, to Oregon's capital city, Salem. I believe that's where Jose is on the line. Jose, welcome to Newsmax TV.
Well, thank you, DJ. I love your program.
Thank you, sir. And what's on your mind?
Well, just like I told your operator, I'm a retired military with 30 years. I did tours in Vietnam and 2 years in Desert Storm, and I just changed affiliation from a Democrat to a Republican. I got tired of what's going on with Washington.
Yeah.
And Trump had it clear. And especially, I'm a veteran, a disabled veteran, and I love the way he wants to handle the situation.
So he wants to stand up and help the vets. And Jose, we would be remiss if we did not thank you for your service and for your phone call. Final word back out to our good friend Betsy about this. Now, based on anecdotally, we had one call from New Mexico, another call from Oregon, party switchers for Trump. Betsy, final 15 seconds to you.
Well, this bodes very well, and we've all expected it, that not only is Donald Trump going to attract more Republican votes in the primaries, but he's going to have an unprecedented vote from the Democrats in November, especially among white males.
We'll see what happens there. Betsy, Sam, our thanks to you. Miranda, our thanks to you. And you stick around. There's more.